Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Srikant Shukla. He provides strategic leadership by being the co-founder of Crayon Data, India and Singapore-based ambitious startup that aims to set up a global business based on big data. Big data, okay. Consumers nowadays are facing this huge big snowball of information coming at them every second, and it's very difficult for them to cope with it. It's even more difficult for content marketers to figure out as to how they are going to get this consumer's attention, not only get it, but also stick it. Big data provides the breakthrough answers. Big data technologies ensure that the consumer not only gets relevant information, but also remains delighted on a sustained basis through ultra-personalization. Ladies and gentlemen, all of this and much more in the talk coming up now.
You know, it's a long day when the MC gets the names of the last two speakers wrong. Correcting myself, I'm Srikant Sastri. Sorry about that. So I know it's a long day. All of you spent the day hearing about how to create great content, how to market great content. I'm going to practically end the day by taking a slightly contrarian view. In some ways, it's a logical culmination of what you probably discussed during the day. Can I have the remote, please? Thanks. Yeah, thanks. So I'm going to take a very consumer-centric view. There are three themes to what I'm going to talk in the next 15-20 minutes. First is, I believe that there's too much content which is causing misery for consumers. That's the first theme. Second is that as brands and content marketers, unless we make life simpler for consumers, everything we do in content creation and marketing will remain an interesting but uphill battle. That's theme number two. Theme number three is a big data mindset can bring a new paradigm for content discovery and marketing. Those are the three themes I'm going to talk about. Now, let's talk about why there is too much data. We don't need to belabor this point. There's content on practically everything that we want. In some ways, it brings total misery. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm sure many of you would relate to it. All of you, like me, travel on work. So here's a situation that I'm very often faced with. I go to a new city. It's 7:30 in the evening. I'm looking for vegetarian food in the new city. So I'm saying, wonderful, there are many options for me to choose from. So I look at my Zomato app, I do a search, I call up, ping a few friends on Facebook, and I maybe send a few SMSs around also. At the end of it, I get so many options that it actually becomes a pain, and finally I decide to either order room service or go down to the hotel restaurant and eat. I'm sure that this is a situation that is not unusual for most people in this room. And most people in this room, especially in this room, are tech savvy, digital savvy. So if you look at your lives, you have Flipboard, Pinterest, TechCrunch. You may be following certain brands, Starbucks, Whole Foods. You're in digital media, so you're looking at ComScore as well. And you have your own emails to catch up. And here's my email. 1,000 unread emails because there's so much content that one has to catch up on. And then on top of it all, brands will come and tell you there are 2,200 dining offers in your city. Now, to me, this is paralysis. I'm not sure how you feel, but I genuinely and frequently feel paralyzed because there is just too much choice. And there is a gentleman called Barry Schwartz, who's from Harvard. He's a TED speaker as well. He's spoken about what he calls as the paradox of choice, how when you have too many choices, it leaves you dissatisfied, you postpone decisions, and there is paralysis. A quick show of hands, if you feel I'm smoking dope, I'm totally off the mark in terms of paralysis of choices, please raise your hand. I'm happy to enter into a debate with you outside this room. But a lot of sentiment around this has been expressed. But there is good news. There is another TED speaker called Sheena Iyengar. She says that there is a way around this. if you give a moderate number of options between 4 to 6, people are more likely to choose, be more confident in their decisions, and happier with their choice. Now, this is interesting because it has implications for us. If we can find a way to simplify content choices, you probably have an answer there. How do you simplify choices? An obvious way is obviously things like recommendation engines, but I think we need to go far beyond that. And this is where all of us in this room who are practitioners of content, practitioners of media, need to shift our mindset. And I'm going to take a comparison here. There is what I call as the traditional mindset. Now, in the traditional mindset, the kind of questions we ask ourselves in our professional discussions every day are we using the right kind of content on our site, on our social media? Should we get a celebrity to make our content more powerful? And if you're a client, your invariable brief to the agency would be, give me content that will go viral. Or if you have lots of money, you might say, let's spend a lot of paid media money in order to ensure that people see my content. Now that is something that is not sustainable. And you will constantly be in a loop where everyone is doing the same and inundating the poor consumer with too much content. If you truly want your consumer to enjoy your content and look forward to your content, I think as content marketers, we need a different mindset. And there are 3 dimensions to this mindset. And other speakers earlier today would have covered it in some measure, but I'm going to spend a few minutes on this because this, to me, genuinely represents the 3 pillars that are important in this context. One is discovery, interest, and serendipity. I noticed some of those words on this as well, but I'm going to spend some time on this. It's like, I don't know how many of you have had this experience on an e-commerce site. I went and bought a striped shirt once on an e-commerce shirt, on that e-commerce portal. Thereafter, I was inundated by messages and offers on many more striped shirts for weeks and months to come. To me, that is contextual but irritating. That is not the kind of content marketing I want. I want discovery and serendipity to happen. Can the brand figure out that because I bought the striped shirt once, it denotes or conveys something? How do we as content marketers facilitate discovery and serendipity around your interests and tastes? The second is ultra-personalization. Anant Rangaswamy, sitting here in the front row, likes his 2 packets of cigarettes every day. Someone else who's a non-smoker, someone else has something, behavior that is totally different. Their tastes are totally different. And this is beyond what is understood as contextual marketing in day-to-day parlance. All those of us who do internet marketing, for us, contextual marketing is about putting those cookies, tracking those cookies, which convey to us certain behavioral aspects, and then you serve out content. We need to go more than that. Just because I visited a car site today does not mean I want to see a car message in times to come. There is something I want which is ultra-personalized. There are many aspects to my lifestyle. Can you serve that content to me? And finally, I'm going to talk about the last part in a bit. A lot of us spend, when we create our content strategy, we often debate, should we put this content? Will this content be of interest to that consumer? And we debate why. We are a food company, so we must put recipe content. We are a beauty products company, so we must talk about this. We debate endlessly about the kind of reasons why we must put a certain content. I'm going to come back to this point slightly later, which is in the big data world, the why does not matter. It's the what that matters. So hold on to that one for a moment. Let's spend a few minutes talking about how big data can change the world of content marketing. Look at these 2 examples. In a world where consumers find it hard to consume content or they're inundated by content, here are 2 brands from the digital age who are making a massive success of it. Amazon today gets 35% of its revenues because of the recommendation it makes its consumers. Consumers are not looking for some products, but when Amazon makes a suggestion, you still press add to my shopping cart. In the case of Flipkart, it's 75%. People are, and we don't relate to not Flipkart, Netflix. In India, we don't relate to Netflix, but the reality is consumers are not going to Netflix looking for a specific movie. When they are on the Netflix site or when they're in their email inbox, they get messages which suggest movies to you. And the suggestions for movies are based on a deep understanding of your likes, your dislikes, and your taste. Now, that kind of ultra-personalization leads to delight. Someone earlier made the point about 800 million search results for a particular item. That is the reality. Today, search cannot provide us the answers when we're looking for something. We need something called as guided choice, which is what Amazon does, which is what Netflix does. The question, Harvard Business Review calls this as the choice engine. What Harvard Business Review says is that if you can replicate what Amazon has done or what Netflix has done in a variety of businesses, you may be a bank, you may be a retailer, you may be a telco, you may be a publisher. But if you can bring the kind of power that Amazon and Netflix has, you can fundamentally transform your business. So the question is, how can we simplify the world's content choices by deploying Amazon-like power? Now, here's where there are 4 important things to look at. The consumer is sitting in the middle. Now, this consumer has a certain behavior that he or she has exhibited, and all of you in this room work with that behavior data. But what you do not work with is that consumer's taste. You do not have a deep understanding of that consumer's taste, which is why you fall short. We talk about social media, but how often and how deeply do we use that influence aspect to determine that when this gentleman wants to buy a book, he might depend on a particular friend's advice, but when he may want to buy a car, he may depend on another friend's advice. How deeply do we use that kind of information? We do not. Context, we use occasionally. We use it online in the context of saying, okay, he's on a car site, therefore that means something. But context can mean today is a hot day. That means he is ready for cold beer and cold coffee. Tomorrow is a cold day. So tomorrow is a day when he's interested in a Starbucks hot coffee deal. So that kind of context-related thing we're not necessarily using fully. So the point being made is, in the world of big data, if we can use all 4 aspects that define the consumer, behavior, taste, influence, and context, you can bring real power to your content marketing. Now, how does this work? And bear with me while I walk you through some details. And this is probably the most important slide here. If you want to deploy Amazon-like power, you need to bring together 2 kinds of data. One is the data on the right, which I'm calling enterprise data. That is the data that you as a client have or you as an agency have. But that data is still limited. For example, if you're a telecom company, you only know about your user's telecom behavior. How many minutes of calling did he do? How many minutes of roaming did he or she do? How many SMS did she send? How many music ringtones did she download? You do not know anything more than that. But if you want to get a broader and deeper view of your consumer, you need to combine a whole world of what we term as external data. If you combine your internal data with external data, you really have extremely powerful tools in your hand to serve ultra-personalized recommendations, and you can do it by adhering to good privacy norms. And I'm going to spend some time talking about 2 examples, but before I do that, this is probably the only slide that qualifies as a plug for my company and what we do. Essentially, what we do is we built a massive taste graph across the world, which has 550 million data points across 9 categories: dining, shopping, travel, music, movies, books, etc. And that represents a massive anonymized graph which captures consumer tastes in key markets. Now, when you take that kind of data and combine it with your data, you can start serving content and you're in business. Let's take two examples. The first example is if you are a telecom company. Today, most telcos in India and elsewhere are grappling with how to increase data consumption. This is probably the most important objective for any telco. Now, if you have this objective, how do you drive more data consumption? You will drive that if your subscribers consume more content. How do you get them to consume more content? And let me narrate a real conversation I had with a senior person at a telecom company a few weeks ago. They have created a large music store. They're trying to get their consumers or users to download more music, but they're not succeeding. Why are they not succeeding? Because they're marketing it wrongly. They have looked at a history of all their users who have downloaded ringtones in the past, and they're sending them SMS after SMS, trying to convince them to now download music on their smartphones. Now, this is obviously insufficient because a person who downloaded ringtones over the last few years is not necessarily the only guy who is going to download music today. You may be a great Mohammed Rafi fan or an A.R. Rahman fan, but you may have never downloaded a ringtone because that was just not your cup of tea. But if today there's a great curated collection of A.R. Rahman available, you may want it. But the telco does not see it that way. Now, if you bring a big data approach to it and say, you know what, I've got this music store, I've got my subscribers, and I know a lot about them, how can I get them to now consume more content? And you can do that. Because if you combine now external data and say, I have this massive graph of taste, and I now combine it with my internal data, I can start figuring out who are the people who potentially should be downloading Zomato, who are the people who should be downloading a ClearTrip or a Yatra or a Make My Trip app, who are the people who should be downloading my music app. And you can now start making suggestions, and people can consume more content. Obviously, there's not enough time for me to walk you through the full details, and we can do that outside the room. But the second example is Ad Optimizer. Traditionally, in the past, we, as advertisers, bought impressions by the bulk. In more recent times, we've become smarter about it. We can do contextual buying, we can do behavioral buying, but it is still based on limited knowledge of a consumer's browsing behavior because of the cookies we drop. But it doesn't have to be limited to that. Can I, for instance, when you're browsing on a site, know enough about you to say, you know what, you've never come to a shirt website in the past, my clothing website in the past, but I know enough about people like you to serve out an ad to you, which is for a new suit that I have launched. If I can do that kind of a thing, that is Amazon-like power, and it goes beyond just using the browsing data. So I just wanted to touch upon these two examples, and we can talk more about it outside. But I'm going to end by saying that today, big data actually gives us the ability to use Amazon-like power to help consumers navigate the content jungle. Otherwise, they're in the danger of being inundated. And if we as content marketers succeed in doing that, we will get a greater share of their time, we will increase our conversions, and we will increase our transactions. And that is what I wanted to share with you in the last 20 minutes. And happy to chat more outside. It's been a pleasure being with you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sastri. A small memento from our side.